Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Joining me by Zoom tonight is Dr. Kelly Campbell, who's the CIO, Chief Information Officer for UVM's Enterprise Technology Services Division. That is a mouthful, Kelly. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having
Yeah.
me. I really appreciate it.
This is very exciting. I've been wanting to talk to somebody about, you always hear about IA and what is it? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it taking over? And so I asked, actually I asked my sister, and she gave me Kelly's name as the right person to talk to. So we're going to talk a little bit about all the work that Kelly does at UVM, but then slide into AI, because all I know is it can be good and it can be bad, depending on where it's being used and who's using it. Is that about right?
That is a great summary. Yes.
Well, that's as far as I've come in my research. So Kelly, can you talk to us about your background and especially about your work at the Vermont State Colleges system, which I was very impressed with. So please go ahead.
I'm happy to give an overview. Well, thank you once again for having me here. I'm have done several talks about AI, and I think all of your assumptions and questions are all very valid and timely. As you know, I recently joined the University of Vermont, where I'm currently serving as the Chief Information Officer, and I'm lucky enough to work with both senior leadership here at UVM and also help provide leadership for the Enterprise Technology Services Division, which is really where a lot of the core services to support the university's mission in support of technology being a backbone for so much of that. I joined UVM very recently. Prior to that, I was at the Vermont State College system, where I served also as Chief Information Officer and Vice President of Technology. And as you are probably aware, Pat, there's significant work that has happened over the past 4+ years across the state of Vermont to think about public higher education, and specifically for the state college system, was really considering the opportunity to think about the presence of those campuses across our state and how we supported students. But with pressures both financially, politically, and beyond, needed to rethink about the structure of what that looked like.
Right.
So a lot of my work with the state colleges was around consolidation of what is now the universities to Vermont State University. So that was Castleton University, Northern Vermont University, and Vermont Technical College. And I will remind folks that Northern Vermont University not that long ago was Johnson State and Linden State. So
Right.
that was exciting work, leading that both as an executive leader for the state college system, but also as the CIO and Vice President of Technology. Had the opportunity to rethink about technology across the state and how we were supporting our students. So we built the first shared services division for the state colleges, where we brought all of the resources together to think dynamically and strategically about how we were supporting the mission of the state college system. So that is the very high level summary, but a wonderful blend of, I love working at the intersection of people and technology and process. And so much of my work, both with the state colleges and as I join a very exciting and growing R1 university in our state, get to continue to do that work. So.
Well, I want to personally thank you for all the work you did at the university, because I had the chancellor on this show and on my radio show a couple of times, and I was following all her reports, and I was so impressed about how she was so transparent and included the students. I don't think they realized how much input they had when you're looking at it from a big picture perspective. I thought, good for her. I would have loved to have worked for her. And I just thank her and you and everybody that we're where we are right now. I think there's a great chance of it being totally successful. I think they're on the right path. So thank you.
Happy with you.
And good for UVM that they hired you. Now you're in what's called the Enterprise Technology Services Division, and it's got. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I've read that you've got 5 departments under you. I think I'd struggle with even one of them, but.
Yeah, so Enterprise Technology Services does have a number of teams under it. And I think for anybody who might be listening who has a technology background, some of this might sound very familiar to you, but our client services team thinks a lot about how we support our colleges across UVM and our community, faculty, staff, students, researchers, et cetera, in getting support. So that's where our helpline comes out of. That's where our folks that are supporting the colleges come out of. Our hardware and software support comes out of that. So it's really the front door to ETS and where you can get support. The application systems and database side is all of the tools and systems people log into every day. So if you think of all of the systems you log into and how you do your work, our student systems, our recruiting systems, all of those things, all of the data that goes into those systems, that's a team that does that. We, of course, in this world have a security team. So our information security office, thinking about the security of our data and our architecture and our environment to make sure that UVM is secure and able to do our work is fundamentally critical. And then, of course, we have a whole systems team that looks at, sometimes I joke this is some of the plumbing, but it's critical plumbing. So things like our data center, things like our research computing, all of the infrastructure to support all of those critical services. And then last but certainly not least is thinking about our telecommunications and network services. So again, some might think of critical plumbing, but every day people come here and they have internet and they have connectivity and they have phones that work. And so we do a lot of support to make sure that the foundations of how folks are able to do their work exist. And it's been a great team. I'm just getting to know them, but
that's great. Yeah, I think you came in. Did you come in January or February?
February.
Yeah, just recently. Can I just ask you a very probably a foolish question, but how do you keep up with all the changes that are happening like every minute? There's something new, and what's good, what's bad. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I mean, at my level, Pat, I think one of the ways, first of all, I'll say this, as CIO in this seat, I cannot do this all alone. And so I am somebody who, in my roles as CIO, has really thought about the team I wrap around me and how we come together. Right. Everybody knows a piece of the puzzle and everybody owns a piece of the puzzle. And through strong team building and strong community, if everybody does their part to learn and keep up, then we can come together and learn. And so I think as CIO, that's really critical. I also think in higher ed technology, there's a lot of professional development organizations that I'm closely part of. And there is such a great community, both in New England and beyond, to help think dynamically about the critical role that CIOs have right now in higher ed to make sure that technology is not only used as the foundation to support our universities, but is used to help transform and innovate. Right. And so partnerships, and that's such a critical part of how I, quote, keep up.
Oof. Well, I say bless you. I'm so proud of myself that I have Facebook and I can do a few things. I'm very proud of myself. But anyway, I read your bio and it said that you have extensive experience in digital transformation, project management, and strategic planning. I know what the last two are, but what do they mean by digital transformation? Is that what you were just talking about innovation and new approaches to things?
Yeah, I think it is. And it's funny, sometimes these terms can be defined very differently for different people. But when I think about digital transformation, technology's been around in different forms for many years. And we've probably throughout time have seen, the innovation from typewriters to keyboards. And, we've seen this real analog to digital transformation with the new first iPod that came out, right? There's been these moments where technology has come in and made significant change to how people do things. And a simple way of thinking about this, I actually use filling out forms as an example, right? Like you've always been able to fill out a paper form. That's been a form of technology, right? You've been able to fill it. A pen is a form of technology. Paper has been a form of technology. At one point, that was technology, right?
Yeah,
that was new. And then, in recent years, we've been able to take the paper form and move it to a digital form. So many people have probably gone on a computer and filled out a form. And I think, as I think about the digital transformation layer wrapped onto that, it's moving beyond what I call digitalization, where we take analog and move it to some form of digital. It's really thinking about technology and how it changes process, culture, experience, and strategy. And it's really this top layer of technology is presenting such opportunity to run our businesses differently, to run our educational institutions differently, to teach people differently, to do things differently. And that to me is operating in a digital transformation environment where there's so much new opportunity. It's understanding how to thoughtfully do those things differently, right? It's
Right.
this.
That's great. I started on a standard typewriter with ribbon. So, so I've seen a lot happen
Yes.
since I started working, all the different changes. So electric typewriter to computers, and it's really been amazing. So the digital transformation, just to sort of segue into AI, that's where AI comes in a little bit, isn't it? In that part of the process. Could you answer this basic question? What is it? And I bet not many people can answer that question. I certainly can't.
Well, I think, it's interesting if you go online and search AI, what it will say is it's the use of computers to perform tasks that humans can do, right?
Huh.
And then you kind of pause and say, wow, what does that mean? And the simple fact is, Pat, that AI is a very, very broad term. Broad term. There are so many specific layers of AI that you could dive into and research and study and use. Somebody once used the analogy that AI is like saying ice cream, but how many flavors of ice cream are there?
Right.
Um, AI has been around for some time, and some folks may not realize that. So, for example, if you use you use Facebook, you said that. And if you log into Facebook, you see that you are probably prompted with certain ads and certain content and certain information, right? And so all of the data behind that is being used to present you with certain content, or if you use Netflix or any type of streaming
Right.
service, right? You're prompted with certain things that interest you. So there's been data that's been collected about you to present certain things. That is a form of AI. So it's existed in some time. I think what's really interesting and why we're seeing so much discussion about AI today is that with the generative AI, which is the creation of content, being so broadly and publicly accessible, right? So being able to go into a chat GPT and have it write a prompt for you, prompting it and have it write a paper for you, or being able to go into a form of AI and have it create a video for you. AI has become so much more broadly accessible that I think now it's really starting to transform how people are doing things. And so the simplest way that I think about it when I talk about it in my place of personal and professional life is I think of AI as an exoskeleton to humans. It's a layer that can wrap around you to help you do things differently. And there's a lot wrapped into that. But it's more than just the technology. It's data and it's the thoughtful application of how it's used. And I'll pause there, but hopefully that gives you a little bit about
It
how I.
does, because they were having a conversation the other day on the computer about AI, and that some of the things that you see on Facebook, they say, are clearly AI generated. The latest thing is all these whales that are totally covered in barnacles. And there's one video after another about the sailors coming and removing the barnacles. And somebody wrote the other day that that's just nonsense, that it's AI. And I'm like, oh, I've been watching this thinking how fascinating it is, and it may not be true. And so how do you know?
Oh, well, I mean, there are, and I'm sure you'll dive into it. I mean, there are so many ethics about AI,
Yeah,
but I think at a fundamental level, I think about AI literacy. So we've had information literacy as a
right?
topic. We've had digital literacy as a topic. And I really think we are not entering, we are in a phase where AI literacy is so fundamental. And so access to folks in our community understanding at a fundamental level what is AI and what are the things to just know about it, I think is really an important starting point, because in a world of so much digital content, and to what I said a moment ago, of so many folks now having access to create their own immediate content to inundate these
Right.
platforms, there is a critical form of literacy that we as humans and consumers need to understand, because there's simply no way to filter it all out. And so there's this literacy layer that I think is really critical, so that we can consume content in a thoughtful way.
So you mentioned ethics. Is there an entity overlooking ethics or checking about people's ethical behavior? I mean, is there somebody watching, or it's just free for all?
No, I mean, I think there's a lot of policies that have been introduced, and I think, you're seeing some of this. A lot of technology leaders, and I think even in the state of Vermont, are thinking about this. The ethical pieces to really think about when it comes to AI is built all on data, right? An immense amount of data. And I think many people in our environment don't understand just how much data they produce every day. Every digital thing you touch, right? You're presenting some breadcrumbs of data. And all of that is being used to build these large language models that provide AI. And there's immense positive opportunity that I'm sure we'll talk about in that. But I think if the data that is being used to develop this AI is unethical, has bias, there's so much wrapped into that the output of what that data presents will have those ethical issues and that bias. So there's a lot of I think in the education space discussion around how do we think, and I have a liberal arts background. So one of the things I think constantly about is the need for the human and technology layer to be interacted. Never more do I think it's been important to have people involved in the use of technology to help provide this ethical and thoughtful layer of conversation. And
and you're mentioning education, and I could just see the magnitude of the role AI could play, and maybe does, in education. But you also mentioned that somebody could type in something and a paper be written for them. And how does the professor know this isn't his work? It's AI, it's the equipment, and is that good? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and quite frankly, in my previous role, this is one we talked about a lot, and I expect it will be in my current role. So what you're seeing right now, Pat, is a lot of different solutions coming to market to help track if something was written in AI. And there are solutions out there that, you can, for instructors to look at and say, X percentage of this paper was AI written. I think there will always be tools to address things that might be not preferred by people, right? But I think one of the things to think about in the education space broadly, whether you're in early childhood, high school, middle school, college, all levels of education, is I think what AI is going to force us to do is to think about forms of assessment differently. And what does it mean to show proficiency, right? What does it mean for a student to show proficiency? And I think there's been some historical ways we've assessed proficiency in learning, right? Papers very much being one of those. But how do we think about other forms of showing proficiency? So I think in the education space, it's starting to challenge educators and folks who think about forms of assessment. What are other ways for Pat to show me that she understands this topic? And papers might not be the only way anymore.
Right.
And it might be a critical way, but it might not be the only way. The other thing I'll say is I think some educators are uniquely using AI to say, use AI in the process, but explain to me how it helped you, how it's learning. So the form of assessment might be a process that's documented by students in a different way.
As a student, I might have to analyze the process and what I learned from it. So the teachers are going to have to constantly be one step ahead, I think.
Yes.
Just to try to help the student learn how to use it, how to use this new technology.
Right. And I will say this, I mean, I think these types of things have come up in the past. If you think about, when the internet first came out.
Oh, right.
This perception of what does it mean to know something now? When phones came out, when laptops came out, these technologies that have broadened access to information, we've always questioned, does that take away from somebody's ability to learn something, process something, right? And I think there's been moments in history, and especially within education, where, students today could go and learn things off YouTube or learn things, right? Those things have existed for some time. It's just going to continue to challenge the thinking about how students learn and how we assess student
Right,
learning.
interesting. That'd be an interesting time to be working. So
Really.
what if I were to apply for a job, well, right in UVM, what would I be expected to know, or what skills would I have that you would be interested in hiring me in this world? I don't know where you learn that.
Right. So I think every industry right now, Pat, is probably different in the approach of that. I think AI is, I think we're seeing new jobs come out around AI. I think, if I was somebody I spoke to a group of college students not long ago about this. And one of the questions they said is, what should I be doing to be workforce ready?
Right.
And the way I think about this is there's, critical skills to be workforce ready outside of kind of a discipline of what you might learn. I think some of those are like how to work effectively with people, how to effectively communicate, right? You need to know the fundamentals of how to use a computer. There's these things that I think are just expected, right? Documented in a job description. They're just expected as somebody applying for a job. And I think what we're starting to see is at this point, and even some of my own job descriptions that I've posted don't necessarily have AI as a specific topic, but I think if I was somebody going into the workforce, I would want to know, what is AI at a fundamental level? What are some of the basic technologies that people use today? And how do I think about AI? Is there places it can help me? And it doesn't need to be a big skill that you dive into. It can just be a literacy that you start to develop and form as you are going into the workforce. And I will say there's a growing number of programs and courses and things online you can take to better understand AI. But I wouldn't let it completely consume and overwhelm you. If you're going for a position that's AI centric, that's a different piece. But I would think about it as what are the suite of skills you need to be effective in the workplace? And I think this is growing to be one of many, right?
I was just thinking, while we're talking about using AI, the people that develop AI, they must be in another category all by themselves to work with this equipment to make it, quote, think. I mean, they must be very unique people to be able to do this.
Yeah, right.
Right?
I mean, it's a very interesting field to be in.
For sure. I love this. I would not be able to apply, but I could appreciate it. And why is there so much negativity about, and I don't know if I say the word fear, but when you hear it, I hear it on TV all the time. Oh, what about AI? Are we going to have to worry about AI? There's a lot of unknown and fear about AI. Is it valid?
Yes. I mean, I think with any technology and with any kind of, quote, major change in society, something that comes in and really changes the way we do things, right? Think about how many people wake up every day and have a phone in their hands now, right? Like that is a major shift in our society from when
Right.
right? I never did I have a phone every day when I woke up, right? And so there's these technologies that have come into our life. And I think as humans, there's this psychological process of fear and change and worry that is justified and something people have to process. I think you see the adoption and awareness of these technologies different based off of where you live and your privilege and what you have access to. And so I think we're at this intersection where understanding from a societal perspective where AI can be a really exciting and good thing for us, which I think there's a lot of places where it can and should and will be and is today, and then where we have to be extremely cautious, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of that, Pat, for me, is the ethical implications of AI, because there is so much that it can do that if it is not managed and augmented by humans, I think there's understandable fear because it can be used to do harm, and it can be used to spread misinformation, and it can be used to instill fear. And I think those are the things to be cautious of. But in other places, I think it presents immense opportunity.
Yeah.
So there's good and bad with everything, right? And I think it's
Yeah.
having people who can be educated, informed, and help inform and be aware to think about the implications.
I copied down this question, and I'm just going to read it to you. It said, if we outsource too much of our thinking, might we begin to lose critical skills and suffer cognitive decline? That's pretty heavy. That's a pretty heavy question. What's the answer to that?
Ooh, I think that answer to that, it will be different based off of your lived experience. I will answer this question as Kelly, who is outside of my professional environment, a mom of two young children,
Aha.
not native. And, I think what I would hope for my children is that they are in an environment as they proceed with school and their experience where there's a blend, that we still have these rooted non-technological experiences in how we grow as humans, and then that they are also presented with opportunity to use technology to do things really exciting and dynamic. And to me, it's this blend of analog and digital that I hope for my children. And so much of that is going to come down to how we adopt these technologies in our educational systems, which is why when I was asked a question at a recent discussion I was participating in, I think education is one of the largest sectors that will be impacted and is being impacted by AI. And it's something that I think educators are trying to think very dynamically about, and it's this balance. And so as a mother and somebody who has some big hopes for their children, I want them to be able to think dynamically. I want them to be able to process dynamically. I want them to be able to have conversation. But to be blunt, we're already challenged by that. Even take AI aside, we're already challenged by that with different technologies, right? Whether video games or cell phones or any other form of technology. So I think it's continuing to have thoughtful discussions about how we blend those two pieces in our communities, in our workplaces, but in our educational environment.
Well, I think kids are pretty resilient if they grow up with this. They may accept it a lot more than those of us who did not grow up with it and have to learn it, because there's always this fear that, you're going to wipe out the data and you're going to do this and that. And it took me quite a while, this is 100 years ago, to be comfortable with the computer, because I always thought I was going to press a button and it was all going to go away, which of course it never does. But
of course, and I think it's a light switch for these, you think of people being born today. AI will have existed their whole life, right? You think of my kids, cell phones have existed since they, right? So there's this technology that is it just is. It's not even quote technology to them. It's just a way of life.
Right.
But as they go through their educational environment, it's we have a lot of conversations to be had about what do we want those experiences to look like. And, I think a healthy blend of those experiences is really important.
Do you know at UVM how much of this is being used in research? Because I would think, I'm thinking about cures for cancer, or there's just so many possibilities with AI. I'm imagining. I mean, this could be a whole dawn of a new place to be, where things are found and identified, and all the cure for this, the cure for that.
Yeah, well, I'll be transparent. I can't answer specifically exactly how folks are using it across UVM yet, because
I just got there. Yes.
But what I will say, Pat, is I think some of the ways broadly that I think AI will and can be very beneficial to those types of things is, I talked about the exoskeleton at the start. You think about all of the data that researchers, I did my doctoral work, I did a qualitative study, the amount of hours that I spent reviewing line by line, coding content, developing themes, there AI can help do that now, right? So the ability to analyze data, produce outcomes,
right,
move things along faster is going to be, and already is, expediting things, right? And so it's saving time. I think there's always this need to make sure that the validity of the data is correct. And I think that's why the data sourcing and the start of the data is so critical, to make sure your data is very strong. But I see it being used in so many different ways to contribute, because what it will do is it augments the human
right,
experience, right? And
right.
it's able to produce
And
things that would require hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of our own time. And that's very exciting, especially as you think about the research capacity.
right, I was just, as you were talking, I'm thinking, oh, it's endless what could happen. We've been looking for a cure because there's so many types of cancers, but a cure for cancer, and maybe this is a great time to be in education, isn't it, for you? I mean, it must be very exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's so exciting. And I think there's, at the end of the day, I think as humans too, I'll share a quick personal story, but, from a healthcare perspective, going through something recently, was part of a series of follow-up appointments with a ton of information. And all of that was a verbal exchange, right? And I think just from a healthcare perspective and so many other disciplines, the ability for AI to help summarize, to help provide information. I think there's just so many
That's great.
opportunities that could be better.
Yeah, as long as you probably obviously you're way ahead of me and others like me. That if we see it, we've got to know that it's true and real, because when you go on the internet, you can put up one topic and it's different approaches to it. So what's real? And that could be a struggle to figure that out.
It really could. I think one of the ways, Pat, to do that, and I think this would be just a best practice anyways in terms of digital literacy, is look at multiple sources, right?
Right.
So, if you were, I think you used an example earlier about something on an animal. Forgive me, I'm missing your example earlier. Um, but go to Google and
Oh,
is
right, right. Oh,
right,
yeah, yeah. The whales with all these crabs on it and stuff, and yeah,
right. Going to Google and, searching that and looking at some different news sources. And, if you're only looking at Facebook, or you're only look
right.
at, and I think so one of the foundations of digital literacy is knowing to look in multiple sources for truth. And I think those types of foundations that have existed for some time are transferable as you think about AI literacy, right?
I do you know how many times when you sit and look at your computer and you've just ordered king size sheets for your bed, all of a sudden you get 100 ads on your computer for king size sheets. That's AI. I'm
Oh
not.
yeah.
I'm not crazy about
No,
it. Isn't
no,
that weird?
it is. It's the paper trail of
Yeah.
yeah.
It's very strange. So are kids getting really into this as a field? Are there courses that teach AI? Is it the new place to be?
Yeah, I will say I think you're seeing nationally um, different programs, certificate programs, um, et cetera. I mean, educational programs that are certifying students in this field. I think there's a lot of fields that are related to this. So a lot of growing technology jobs. Data scientists is an example, is a great example of AI is built off of data. So data scientists, I think you're seeing prompt engineers. A lot of AI needs to be effectively prompted, right? So I think you're seeing a lot of jobs coming to market around that. And so you are seeing educational institutions start to offer new programs, maybe some programs that are brand new, some programs that are building on historical computer science or data science.
Right,
And then I think you're just seeing a growth of AI foundation, certificate programs. I'll
right.
speak specifically for my previous role. I know when I was at the state colleges, the Community College of Vermont specifically had a brand new AI certificate that we stood up,
Ah,
right? Just to give everybody who had interest in that a foundation and being able to get some form of certification.
Yeah,
So
'cause I would think this is the place to be in the next 10, 15 years and thereafter, because I don't think there's any limit, is there?
no, I think it's going to be how humans continue to.
Is there a possibility for cost savings for, I think people are a little afraid that it's going to take over their job, which would sadly be a cost savings, but then you'd probably have to hire the AI people, so it might balance off. But are there potential cost savings with AI? I would think so.
I think you are seeing definitely a shift in the workforce, and there's a lot of interesting research out there on the workforce. But you may not see this as much in Vermont right now, but recently I went to Boston for a Celtics game, and I went into the arena, and it's all AI now, right? You take something off of a shelf and it recognizes what you took off of the shelf. You go to these places now that are thinking about that somebody's not checking you out anymore, right? It's all AI driven. So I think you're going to see in some of the service-based type industries that AI will automate a lot of that and quote present savings in some form. I think there's a lot of interesting research around the equity impacts of AI, and I will be transparent that I'm outside of my technology work, I'm a commissioner with the Vermont Commission on Women. And
Good for you. That's a great group.
It is a great group, and I think one of the things I think a lot about in that role as I chair the equity or the workplace equity committee is in Vermont, we know there's a larger percentage of women that are in service-based industry jobs, and those are the jobs that are and will be automated. And so there is, I think, a lot of equity challenges wrapped into some of these conversations when we think about how it will impact different populations of people. So there's just a lot of interesting discussions to be had when we talk about cost savings. Of course, there's cost savings opportunities, but I think it's workforce shifts.
Right.
And opportunities for some and will be more challenging for others. And I think it's going to be how do we move everybody along, right?
So I'm thinking that the college, UVM and all colleges, are going to have to really be thinking about how to make sure they're training their students for this shift, for the new jobs that are coming, to be able, because it takes a while to train the students, so you've got 4 years, you've got to be ahead of the game. That's going to take a lot of foresight and thinking and planning.
Right. Yeah, and I think, but what I'm, so excited to be in my new position is I think especially UVM being a new R1, I mean, a new exciting R1 university for this state of Vermont, but has been serving the state of Vermont as a land grant university for some time. There's so many exciting things happening here and people that are already innovative and thinking about this work. I think, UVM and state colleges and all of higher eds have to grapple with how do we adopt AI into our own processes? How do we ethically and thoughtfully use it, right? But I do think there's a lot of educators that are thinking very thoughtfully about how do we use this to support our students? How do we use this to student research? And so, I think there's people thinking thoughtfully about it, and it will take some time to really. At what point will we be doing it? I don't know, because AI will continue to transform.
Right. Yeah. And I'm thinking the teachers are going to need some training and some support too, because this is all new to them.
Right.
So I felt very bad for them during COVID when they had to go to Zoom, because Zoom is a skill. How to teach effectively on Zoom is a skill. And a lot of them haven't been trained on something like that, but that's sort of maybe that's an AI sort of thing. And how do you get them up to speed so they can recognize where AI may help them or not?
Right. I think thoughtful faculty development is really critical. And when I was at the state colleges, one of the things that I did was sponsored a system-wide AI retreat.
Oh.
And that day,
great.
Was to just educate everybody about what is AI, right? And so when you talk about this topic, which you started this talk saying it's really overwhelming and confusing and all of those things I think people feel, For me, it's if you strip all that down, a starting place is just fundamental literacy and what is AI. And I think for faculty and educators, creating space to learn and then creating space to understand and then creating space to think about application. It is a student experience as if they are the student, right? So I think creating opportunities and programs and offerings will be really important to faculty.
Probably important in your role to reach out to your compatriots in other universities at your level to talk about what's happening, what are they experiencing,
Right, right.
because you can't be left behind. I think this is going so fast, you just can't afford to be left behind.
No, you can't. And I think there's a lot of collaboration in the higher ed IT community to do just that,
I would think,
collaborate.
yeah,
And yeah.
because it would benefit everybody if we're all on the same page. That's great. So how did you get involved in all of this? Is that something right from the get-go you said this is what I want to do, or it just sort of evolved for you?
In terms of technology, Pat, or
Yeah, technology, because that's,
yeah, it's actually the true story is when I started my undergraduate work, I was placed in a work study position in IT, and
ah,
it was very much like, why am I here? This makes no sense. This is not for me. I don't do this. And a wonderful friend and mentor that I've had the chance to be close to in my life. He was overseeing the student employment program in IT.
oh, great.
Give me 2 weeks before you quit. Just give us 2 weeks. Just try it. Just try it. And I 2 weeks in and I never left. And
Oh,
it
wow.
opportunity as a student to work in technology and to grow from there. And I think one of the reasons I've loved technology is because I spoke earlier about intersections. I love connecting people and technology and solutions and ideas. And technology is such a wonderful field to do that. And technology and education is even more of a field to do that. So
And
it's great.
it will eventually, I'm hoping, get down to the different grades too. I mean, I think there's probably right now a focus on higher ed, but at some point, and how involved would the tech centers be involved in this? As involved as you are, you think? Because that's I love tech centers. I'm a real proponent, especially here in Vermont. We don't have the higher paying jobs necessarily in work environment, but anybody who's working with their hands or they're just in demand here.
They are. Yeah. I mean, I think, I'm sure if you had somebody in my position in the K through 12s, they probably have similar thoughts around AI, different thoughts around AI,
Right.
definitely different ethical implications around AI. But I think a lot of the automation components of AI are really going to transform. I know, just for example, in the automotive industry, if you think
Oh,
of vehicles today, they're computers, right?
driving themselves. Oh,
Computers. And so I
yeah.
think, again, that's another great example where you need a human layer wrapped into the technology there to make sure that those cars are uh, designed thoughtfully and ethically. They're not right. I mean,
Yes.
there's guardrails to this work, and so I think while my interest is in the higher ed space, beyond that, I'm interested in the education sector broadly, and I think there's just different types of conversations happening at different levels of education based off of who we serve, right?
That's great. Um, so, like a project, what would be something that you would be working on right now in your job? Do you know yet the kind of projects that you would be looking at for what you do?
Related to AI?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, when I'll answer this through the state college's lens when I was there. When I
Okay.
was leaving my position, the way I was thinking about my role as CIO and how I supported this, I was thinking as kind of legs of the stool. And so I was thinking about how do we start from a student perspective with foundational AI literacy? How do we think about wrapping this into the student experience, right? And that can be through student experiences outside of the classroom, but obviously within the classroom. But how do we be transparent with our students and help educate them about what is AI? I think on the faculty side, thinking very thoughtfully about the adoption of AI, how it impacts assessment, how it impacts curriculum changes, how it can support research. Those are really, quite frankly, people conversations about AI, right? To
Right.
think about the adoption of it. And then I think maybe a little more uniquely on the staff side, was working on some projects to think about automation of processes and how we run our universities. And it can even come down to the local level, Pat, right? When I think about logging into the computer every day, when I think about the amount of time I spend drafting emails, when I think about the amount of time I spend getting the summary of emails. I mean,
Right.
when I think about the meeting notes and these meetings that we're in, all of that with AI can be automated in a
Right.
way that wasn't before. So I think there's a lot of opportunity when I was in my previous role, and we'll think about it here, is how do we think about the adoption of AI to improve our processes and save time so that we can have our folks focused on the most critical work
Right.
that we do.
That's a very exciting to just hear that the efficiencies that could be obtained, because everybody's always talking about effective and efficient, and here you go. Is it expensive for an investment for the university? I have no idea whether we're talking, millions of dollars, or of course it's obviously whatever you're building, but it could run into some money, right?
Well, I think, broadly speaking around AI investment, I think it's what do you want to do around AI? And so I think you see some universities, just talking from the higher ed IT space that I am engaged in,
Right.
some universities that are going all in and building their own on-premise infrastructure to be able
Wow.
to build and deliver AI. You're seeing other universities that are using cloud-based solutions that implement AI into their processes. I think there's different strategies and approaches, as there is with any technology strategy,
Sure.
for what to do. And just like with any strategy comes the cost, right? And so for me, it always comes back to what are we trying to do? And how do we wrap, a technology layer on top of that? And
You know what you were worried about? Kids are like sponges. They'll just absorb it. The ones who are like your children that are growing up in it, they'll just absorb it, and the rest of us will be coming along kicking and screaming, kicking and screaming.
yeah.
Although I always wished I have a cell phone, and I'm sure I only use a half of what my cell phone is capable of doing. Because I'll watch people where they're transferring data. I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, and I would love to be as up on things as they are. And I don't know how to get there, but I think with AI, there's probably so much stuff that you need to know and understand. It's quite a challenge.
It
I
is.
think.
When I think about outside of the education space and just as a community member in Vermont, I think it'd be really interesting to look at what libraries are doing right now.
Oh, that's a good point.
I'll connect people to fundamental tools and awareness. I see libraries as such a great partner and vehicle for helping build local and
Great.
providing local resources. Um, and so, again, I think that when you talk about a topic this big, it's just what's your starting point? And I
Right.
think today's conversation, Pat, right? Like you had the inquiry to say, what is this? And let's learn more about it. And I think that is such a great place for people to start,
Right.
and they'll find their path from there.
Well, so we only have about a minute left, but what would you give advice to people like me? I mean, what is our next step to learn about this? What should, after watching this great video, what should people do to be ready? As I'd like to be ready.
Right, right. I mean, I think it's what are you interested in? So if somebody's listening to this, hopefully now they understand a little bit about what is AI. Some people might want to go play with a tool, which many tools are broadly accessible. You can download apps on your phone in the App Store and you can play around with it. I think it's important if you do that, you understand and maybe read a little bit about the data, right?
Uh-huh. Right.
Just like you would with any other app. I think you could look at different online. There's a lot of free, YouTube videos and higher, educational videos
Right.
around AI. I think some people are really interested in talking about like how does AI impact things, and I think you'd find a lot of different community forums talking about that.
Great.
So I think it's really what is your interest, but there's nothing like just diving in and playing with it. And I
Do it.
think for I told a student this not long ago. I said, just download it and play with it. There's nothing like getting your hands dirty to figure out what feels right to you.
Right.
And, I think once you experience it, you'll have a better idea of what it truly means in action.
Excellent. Dr. Kelly Campbell, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I really appreciate it. I think I've learned something. That's always a good sign. Thank you very much, Kelly. We'll hopefully see you soon, and we really appreciate it. And thank you for tuning in. This is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Thank you very much, and good night.